Hello. So this is my second time recording this podcast because I went through and I listened to the audio of the first one and I was fumbling because I don't have an official setup, right? So I just had my phone and I didn't realize how much I was fumbling with it, and I'm like, oh my god, yeah, I can't use this. So hello, I'm Toby. That's my internet alias. I go by Toby. Otherwise known as a weird cosplayer, master of cringe, FNAF creepypasta. I am more known in the fandom as a cosplayer, creepypasta, or Marble Horns too. I'm more known as a cosplayer, but I feel this is a little known fact about me, I have a Jeff rewrite from 2018, and that segues into today's topic. I did a Jeff rewrite back in 2018, and something I still enjoy, still am proud of, because of quarantine this year, I have a little bit more time on my hands and stuff. I figured I wanted to do a revisitation of it. You know what? It's been 2 years. I think that's fair to revisit it 2 years later. So I figured, hey, I could do a podcast to kind of talk about things that I would have changed, or even just talk about the characters a little bit more in depth, 2 years later. So yeah, that's what I'm doing, because I figured a podcast is the best medium to talk about this, right? It's a good medium to talk about this kind of stuff. So, I guess to start off, where do I start off? So I've never done a podcast before, like officially. I mean, I recorded one before this, and I have to scrap that because the audio wasn't very good. But yeah, so hopefully I have this podcast thing figured out. Anyway, so, yeah. So I guess to start off, to segue, I want to talk about the original Jeffs. So my Jeff is a rewrite of Jeff Woods. So, the story with the little bratty emo kid that beats up these kids, and then he gets lit on fire and pour bleach on him after an epic, amazing battle. Creepypasta, one of the best moments in creepypasta history is that freaking fight. So that's a rewrite. That's what my rewrite is of. Because if you don't know, that Jeff Woods, is not the canon, is not the original Jeff. Well, he's canon in his own universe, but he's not the original Jeff the Killer. The original Jeff the Killer is Jeff Hudick, which, it's like crazy, because it's like, okay, how old were you when you found out that Jeff Hudick is the original Jeff the Killer? It's like crazy. So the whole thing is that, Jeff Hudick was made in 2008, if I'm not mistaken. There was an original video where Jeff's creator, Cezur, talks about, his Jeff the Killer character on a YouTube video, but I think that YouTube video is no longer available, like in 2008, and then a few years later, a fan of his earlier work had made the Jeff Woods story, with, where he's 13, he gets lit on fire. Apparently, because there's actually, if you go on to Creepypasta and you look at the Go to Sleep story, there's literally a publisher's note that says, oh, hey, by the way, Jeff's original creator, he claims he didn't write this story. A fan of his work did. A fan of his early work did. So essentially, it's technically a fan fiction. Jeff Woods, I think, is more conceived to be the more canon Jeff the Killer. Like an alternate universe type way, but I feel like he's popular enough to the point that he's considered canon. It's just crazy. Yeah, but the original Jeff story, original Jeff the Killer, is this middle-aged... Well, I don't know if he's middle-aged in the story, but, I think currently his age, as a aging character, currently his age would be, 35, I'm pretty sure, but the whole thing with Jeff Hudick is that he was this adult cleaning his bathtub with hyaluronic acid. He falls in, his face is disfigured and stuff, and that's kind of, the whole consensus, instead of, this kid who gets lit on fire, which obviously, an adult falling into... Hyaluronic acid is way more realistic in the sense of his appearance is more realistic than this whole dramatic, oh, this kid's covered in bleached and then lit on fire. But I think that Jeff Woods is considered more popular because it's more relatable to teens, if I'm going to be honest. He's 13. He's more, the character is aged down to be 13. I feel like the writer of the original Jeff Woods story was maybe around 13 as to why Jeff was aged down to be a 13-year-old kid. And it's just more relatable, the whole bullying thing. And just that whole topic, it's a lot more relatable, especially the way Jeff acts. I'm like, oh my god, this is totally a 13-year-old. And yeah, and even, when you're, a little bit older, like me, I'm not 13, I'm 18, right? It's nice to kind of, read a story with the character that kind of brings you nostalgia back to when you were that age, too. But yeah, anyway, so I guess as a segue into today's topic, there are, a lot of different rewrites of Jeff. Rewrites of Jeff the Killer are not new in this fandom. There are so many rewrites of Jeff. Obviously, there's even an official one. Jeff Woods, he got an official rewrite back in 2015 made by Banning K. So this one, Jeff, it explains a little bit more about Jeff, like why he's good at fighting and stuff, his relationship with his parents as to why he kills his parents kind of thing. It's a little bit more gone in depth, and he's shot with a flare gun in the eye rather than being lit on fire and stuff, and Randy is a little bit more characterized in this story. There's actually really mixed bag reviews of the story. Personally, I love this story. I love the Banning K rewrite. I really enjoy it. I think the appearance of Jeff is very interesting too. And there's also, like, other rewrites. I mean, obviously, I haven't read all the rewrites or listened to them, but I do know that, for example, Mr. Betty Kruger, he has his own version of Jeff Keaton. I haven't looked into Jeff Keaton enough. I listened to Needles and Smiles. Amazing work, by the way. But I need to know more about his version of the character. But, I'm pretty sure it's similar to the original Jeff the Killer, but there's obviously, the story happened different. Instead of his brother named Lou, his brother's name is David. So, Jeff and David. Jeff and Lou rolls off the tongue better, but hey, it's cool, and even the character looks cool. And even recently, David Neer, he has a series called The Morgue Files, essentially where he's, it's an anthology series where he's gonna take different characters, creepypasta characters, and, add his own spin to them. So essentially it's an audio movie, because it's not a movie with visuals, but it's like, audio movie in the sense, like, it's just all voice acting of Jeff's story. So he kind of redid Jeff's story. And it was so interesting. He's Jeff Mason in that one. It was very cool. On the edge of my seat, his voice acting work, and everyone's voice acting work in the story was amazing. And yeah, just another characterization of Jeff explains his appearance. He has albinism. He, dyed his hair black. And then, I won't get into how he was lit on fire and how the Chelsea smile came into thing, because that would be a spoiler. But yeah, it's a little bit more of a different renditions of the character. So, what I'm trying to say is Jeff rewrites, they're not new to the fandom. They're very interesting. I love seeing different versions of Jeff, especially, I feel like he's such like a broad spectrum already. The canon version of Jeff that the popular version of the character is already headcanon. He's not even like the original one, so even then. And also, Jeff's creator, apparently he's very open to different characterizations of Jeff. He's very open to rewrites. He likes seeing different versions of the characters, which I think that's awesome. So that kind of segues into my version of Jeff. I guess to start off with a little headcanon, I guess, because not all of them, but a lot of the rewrites of Jeff, they have, like, a name to them. They have a different last name, or a different middle name, or something's a little bit different. My distinguishing feature for my headcanon Jeff, if you don't know, his name is Jeffrey Kane Woods. Why Kane? Not Kane Hodder. I know I headcanon Jeff as a big Friday the 13th fan, but not because of Kane Hodder, who played Jason in a few movies. No. But instead, it is actually an edgy biblical reference, because if grade 12 English last year taught me anything, it's that edgy biblical references in media are a common thing. This wasn't even, in the actual rewrite. Like, in the actual rewrite, this wasn't a headcanon of mine when I wrote it back in 2018. This is more like last year I was in English class and my teacher was talking about biblical references in literature, and I'm like, I need to add a biblical reference. So if you don't know, it's a Bible story, Cain and Abel, who are the sons of Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve in the Bible being the first two people, that Cain essentially murders his brother, Abel, and he becomes the first murderer known to mankind in the Bible. And that's what the whole story is about. And in that context, it's like, well, in that sense, it's kind of a reference to the fact that Jeff murders his brother, Lou, and from as far as we know, Jeff is the first murderer in the Woods family tree. Who knows, if you go back hundreds of years, maybe you'd find another serial killer in the bloodline, but, he's the most notoriously known in that sense. And he kind of, like, the whole murdering thing came out of nowhere. That's my whole thing. I remember I put that on Instagram last year just to hear thoughts. I was like, I think I came up with that headcanon like a year ago. And someone replied, they were like, would you consider making Lou's middle name Abel? And I said, that as cool as that would be, it'd be too obvious. It'd be like if you give your kids middle names Cain and Abel, you're asking for the one named Cain to, smash the other's head with a rock. That was an edgy joke, but, Okay, anyway, so kind of just as a little segue now. Yeah, so that's a little headcanon to start off with this. I keep saying segue, that's like my favorite word. Segue. But, yeah, so I did a rewrite of Jeff Woods. I think originally, it wasn't a smooth process, but it was a slow descent to, hey, I have a lot of headcanons. That I remember back when Jeff was big. I've talked about this many times on, like, Instagram or YouTube before, but, when Jeff was really big, I'm guessing maybe, like, 2012, when he was really big and the whole urban legend was out. Or maybe it wasn't even 2012. I don't know. I was between the ages of 10 and 12, I'd say. I had a very big fear of Jeff the Killer and Slenderman. I heard about the stories of both of them. They terrified the crap out of me. The pictures were enough to scare me and keep me up at night. I thought Jeff was going to be in the basement and was going to murder me. I thought Slenderman was freaking in the forest. So you know what I mean? Like, just that whole thing right off the bat. Yeah. So I guess when I joined the fandom in, what year? 2016, the beginning of 2016, so I was 14 at the time. No, was I 14? Yeah, I would have been 14 at the time, in grade 9. I had joined Creepypasta within September. So the very beginning of grade 9, I joined Creepypasta. I guess I was hesitant to like Jeff, you know. I was interested in the character, but I guess that fear lingered on. I was still like, eh. And then I ended up, you know, we all know how that went. I'm making a whole ass podcast on Jeff the Killer. Clearly, I'm a big Jeff fan. So that kind of turned into that. And I guess I think it's officially started with me drawing my own headcanon version of the character. Because if you don't know, I have this pretty distinct look for Jeff the Killer. I cosplay him. And I guess that's kind of the most distinguishing feature. Because I feel like all the Jeff rewrites have their own look to them. This is my look for the character. I have my own look for the character and stuff that you will find again in cosplays and stuff. But I've also drawn him many times. And that whole thing, I guess, started off with, me adding little edgy accessories to Jeff. Because I do that. I try to make characters my own with designs, like, make my own designs for existing characters without obviously claiming to have the characters, because, you know, Jeff does not belong to me. It officially started off with this one image of Jeff that I had seen, I think on Pinterest maybe, of Jeff with a side shave. I don't know who the artist is. I don't remember what their name is, but I will... Oh, no, I actually think I have the name saved. I have the name saved on my laptop. Let me get it. Okay, so the name of the user is Blei Hatsuki 11. Okay, I have it saved on here. I just want to make sure. I'm pretty sure that is what their name is. I'm sorry if I butchered it, but that's so I saw this picture of Jeff with a side shave, and I was like, I need to draw Jeff with a side shave. So I did. I changed the hairstyle a little bit. The side shave is on the other side of his head. In my headcanons, because I didn't want to fully copy and rip off this person's idea. But I guess from there, you know, kind of start to characterize Jeff a little bit more, add a little bit more of a spin, add like an actual design, like more headcanon design, and then the headcanon design turned into a lot of headcanons and thinking of the character more in depth, and hey, this is just some cool creepypasta character, thinking more of the character in depth. And I think the headcanons are really what started everything, where I had headcanons where I was like, okay, how can you explain Jeff and Ben's friendship realistically? Like, I mean, if we're going off the creepypasta version of Ben, you know, how do they become friends? Because, you know, the characters are pretty infamously known for being friends. So I was like, oh, what if Jeff and Ben were friends when they were kids? Ben moved away. Jeff hadn't seen him in a while, only to find out that Ben drowned in summer camp. And then they're reunited later as Jeff the Killer and Ben drowned. That was kind of the original idea. I came up with this like 3 years ago. I remember specifically because I wrote this headcanon out because I posted a bunch of headcanons with a Jeff cosplay in December of 2017. I remember this specifically. And then from there, a few months later, I kind of thought of the idea. I was like, okay, what if we intertwine Ben drowning into Jeff's story? Like, what if, Randy and his band of misfits were the cause of Ben drowning? Like, what if that was a direct result? Like, foul play, they push him in, he drowns. What if that's a direct result of Randy, which connects, you know, Randy and Jeff in that way? Like, oh, Jeff had his best friend murdered by this kid. Intentionally, still awful. And from there, it's not just a, hey, you stole my bro's wallet, give it back, let me beat the shit out of you. It's more like, hey, you murdered my friend. You know what I mean? Like, it's more of like that kind of sense. Like, it's personal. It makes a little bit more sense in my mind. And from there, I came up with a headcanon. I was like, I could really do a whole ass rewrite of Jeff at this point. I have so many headcanons. So I remember I put on Instagram specifically, I was like, hey guys, would you be interested in seeing a Jeff rewrite? And everyone was like, hell yeah, we'd love to. Not everyone, but a lot of people were like, yeah, I'd be interested in hearing that. So from there, I kind of started planning. And funny thing, originally I had planned to write my Jeffrey Wright over the summer because we were driving down to Orlando that summer for Disney. We drove down to Orlando. Obviously, it was like days in a car, so I figured, I could write it on my phone. I can write this rewrite on my phone, forgetting the fact that I get car sick easily, so I was only really able to add in the beginning hockey fight, like a little bit of the beginning hockey fight. That's like literally all I was able to write. So, and then I got busy with the rest of summer. I guess I was trying to enjoy my vacation. We were in Disney. I tried to enjoy my vacation, and then when we got back, I got busy with the summer. I just wanted to enjoy the summer. And then school rolled around. I got busy with school. And then October rolled around. I was busy with October especially because I do cosplays around October, centered around like Halloween. So I have like a theme. And then I do like a bunch of like cosplays, and makeup looks towards that theme, right? So I'm busy with that. And, it wasn't until literally after Halloween in November, I actually sat down, I got the cover art done for the original Jeff rewrite, I got the cover done, and I actually started writing it. And it took me literally a month and a half. Only a month and a half straight. And when I mean straight, I mean that I was writing it every day. I'd bring my laptop to school, like, during class. I'd be writing my rewrite, which I don't fully recommend, I should have been paying a little bit more attention, but I guess I was still listening, but I was like, writing, even in shop, I had shop class, and I pulled my laptop out, in shop class, to literally work on a Jeff rewrite, like, that's how much it was, it was pretty crazy, I have to say, it was a pretty crazy process, and I think that is a direct result of one thing that I have to say about the story, looking back at it now, is that it felt way too fast-paced. It should have been a little bit more paced in the sense that it felt really fast. Like, I know that's kind of how it's supposed to be, like this fast story of how like this normal suburban kid becomes a serial killer, essentially. But it still felt really quick. I wish I would have slowed it down a little bit, because when I reread the story, because at the time of me recording this, I reread the story last night, just to kind of refresh my brain. I hadn't read the whole thing for a while. Obviously, if I'm revisiting, I have to reread the story. And I was actually scared I was going to hate it. Because when you make something, you're really proud of it, then you don't touch it for a few years, and then you want to go back and look at it, and you're worried it's going to be terrible. That's what I was worried about. I don't know if you guys know what I'm saying, but that's what I was worried about. And turns out it wasn't that bad. Sure, there are things I would have done differently now, which, that's why I'm doing this podcast, to talk about those things. But, yeah, there are things I would have done differently, but for the most part, I don't mind it. But one thing, I think that the fact that I wrote it in a month and a half, and I was just way too excited to get it out. I think I was way too excited to get it out. I didn't take enough breaks and stuff. It felt, not rushed, but it felt like a pretty quick story, which is funny, because it's an hour-long read. I calculate, it's around an hour-long read, and I was like, wow. That's pretty crazy, especially because the original, when I say original, I mean, the Jeff Woods story, not Jeff Hudick. So, Jeff Woods, his story is, 20 minutes long. Apparently, I think it's, 20, 25 minutes long is the estimated time for the read. Obviously, you can make it longer, depending on how you read it. But that's one thing that was, kind of weird. I was like, wow, that's shorter than it felt. I don't know, maybe that's just me. Maybe it's not as fast-paced for other people. I just felt it was too fast-paced. I guess how I would have written it now, there would have been a lot more, characterization, especially with Lou and Jeff. Kind of establish how their brotherly dynamic is, how they are as brothers and stuff. Maybe go more into depth with the parents. Maybe talk more about Ben. And even, Randy, for sure, which I'll talk about Randy. Trust me, I'll go back and I'll talk about Randy in this podcast. But that's, one thing that I was what I would have changed. And also, I would have given a freaking physical descriptions of the characters. And you might go, well, Toby, there are physical descriptions. I described their hair and stuff. But, no, I would have actually gone into depth about what every character looks like. I'm damn it. That's one thing I like now is, describing the character's face exactly, how I imagine it. Obviously, it's fun having, there's, only a little bit described, so then you can kind of headcanon the rest. But I was I wish I kind of went in and I described the certain looks for these characters, because I have certain looks for them, and I wish, I went back into detail rather than just their hair. And I remember when I had my friend, because I asked my friend to edit my Jeff rewrite for me, I asked her to go through and edit it. One thing she said was maybe characterize the characters a little bit more by something else rather than just their hair, which is definitely a fault looking back in the story. I'm like, yeah, I characterize these characters a little bit too much by their hair. But that's one thing, I want to give more physical descriptions than with the original Jeff Woods story, because in the original Jeff Woods story, like, we have no idea what any of the characters really look like, except for Jeff the Killer. So I guess from Jeff the Killer, you, like, the picture, you kind of guess that, oh, okay, Jeff, like, has long hair and stuff, like, that's kind of where the long hair part comes in, but, like, for the other part, like, we don't really know what any of the kids look like. Like, Randy is literally only described as wearing, like, a Hollister shirt at one point. I'm pretty sure that's the only really big description we get of him. But yeah, that's like the whole thing is like, I think why maybe I didn't give physical descriptions is because I knew that there were going to be, like, I was going to have drawings scattered in without the rewrite, like, kind of showing the physical description of the characters. That's why I settled off the descriptions. But can't really change that. But I could talk about it. So I guess, talking more about the characters now, I kind of want to talk more about, like, Randy and Jeff, and when I say Jeff, I mean young Jeff, because I think it's distinct that Jeff and Jeff the Killer are two distinct characters, like, Jeff Woods, young Jeff Woods, and Jeff the Killer, two different characters. Jeff turns into a totally different person, by the time he becomes Jeff the Killer, he adopts that persona. Sure, I think there are remnants of Jeff Woods still in there where he regrets what he's become. He thinks he's a monster and this and that. But I do think that Jeff the Killer persona that he adopts, as he becomes a sociopath, is more, it's like a totally separate person away from Jeff Woods. So in that sense, you could go, Jeff Woods is essentially non-existent anymore. Jeff the Killer is a new, even though they're literally the same person, it's just like they're two different characters in that sense. So Jeff, one thing I do get told with my Jeff rewrite that I always get really happy whenever I get this compliment is that I made Jeff seem more, like a realistic a realistic kid, rather than just some little whiny brat who is lit on fire. That's one thing that I did find people did, compliment me for, and I was really happy to hear that, because that's one thing I wanted to do. I wanted to give Jeff a little bit more of a personality, give him more motives, paint him more as a character a little bit more, rather than just, oh, this kid, it has weird urges to hurt people, which, I mean, again, nothing against the original Jeff Woods story. I love that story. It's a guilty pleasure of mine. But yeah, so that's one thing that really I wanted to do, and make him seem more like a realistic kid. Like, no, this kid is not, he's a normal suburban kid, literally. He's just a normal suburban kid. He does well in school. He's athletic. He has a pretty promising future ahead of him. He likes things that most 14-year-old boys would like. He's a big horror fan. He likes, obviously, like, rock music. He's a baby emo, I'd call him. And it's like, those interests aren't what sways him into becoming Jeff the Killer. It's just the trauma of what happens. But yeah, he's essentially this normal kid who has a very promising future ahead of him that is just completely destroyed. It's destroyed by trauma. It took one bad day for it all officially to collapse, which essentially is when he's, the accident where he's lit on fire. That's the one bad day. But you can take this into even, like, a Joker analogy, which is actually kind of funny, because Jeff's always, like, described as a rip-off Joker. I know I make these jokes all the time, too. He's, like, described like, oh, rip-off Joker, this and that. But to be fair, if you look at it in this lens, it's like, yeah, Jeff actually isn't too far off from the Joker. If you look at the Killing Joke origin for the Joker, where essentially he was just a normal guy who, was a starving comedian who had to feed his family, he had to make ends meet financially for his pregnant wife. He joins a crime operation under the alias the Red Hood, essentially, and to try to get money for his family out of desperation. And in the whole operation, he ends up, like, Batman comes, he falls into a vat of chemicals, therefore giving birth to the Joker. It took him one bad day, this normal guy, like, one bad day for him to become the freaking Joker in this analogy. Obviously, like, there are different origins for the Joker, but this is one, like, I guess the most popular one, I would say. I know I haven't read the comic for it, but I do know that there is a movie, which I've seen the animated movie. I really enjoyed the Joker stuff in it. Admittedly for me, the Batman and Batgirl stuff is a little bit weird. I was like, a little weird. But the Killing Joke stuff with the Joker is very interesting. Mark Hamill, as always, remarkable voice work as the Joker. Definitely recommend watching it. I guess to go more into depth of what I'm saying. Depth, yeah. But same idea with Jeff, is that literally it's just one bad day. And again, it's funny to actually bring a Joker analogy in here, because, it's like, yeah, the whole joke is that Jeff's a ripoff of the Joker, but, like, is he really that far off in that sense? Is that Jeff, he experiences the trauma of losing his best friend to foul play, you know? Like, he literally, like, I'll go into depth more about how I imagine Ben actually, like, what happened to him actually happens behind the scenes. But, yeah, so essentially, like, this traumatic event happens in the summer where he loses his best friend, tragically, to foul play, where a kid literally pushes his best friend in. So he's going through loss and mourning. I'm sure he was in the, like, you know, the anger stage of grieving at that point. Essentially, he's confronted with the kid who did, you know, what he did to his best friend, who essentially kills his best friend indirectly, and being confronted with him, he gets no closure. This kid is, like, an absolute asshole, and he gets himself in a bad situation. You know, he picks a fight with the wrong kid, and Jeff gets himself in a bad situation where in the end, he becomes Jeff the Killer. Like, I would define again the one bad day for Jeff is 100% where he gets lit on fire. The accident, 110%, is the one bad day for Jeff. You know, from there, you know, he experiences trauma. He has brain injury from a concussion. He becomes a totally different person when in turn, it actually, like, his disfigurement, the way he looks, he's carved a smile into his face, that whole look of Jeff the Killer, that is, like, a separation from the old Jeff. Like, the old Jeff is gone. The new Jeff is being born. Like, Jeff the Killer is born as that fire happens, as he's recovering in the hospital, as those surgeries are going on, as doctors are trying to save his life. That's when Jeff the Killer is born. As soon as those bandages come off and he sees his new face, that's when Jeff the Killer is born. From trauma and everything. And that's kind of just, like, I don't know how clear that motivation is in there, if, like, that's how it's seen. But I wanted to write Jeff kind of like an anti-hero. Like, he starts off as this misunderstood, troubled kid. Like, he's going through some really bad times. In that sense, and he picks a fight with literally the wrong person, which turns him literally into a sociopath. And obviously, the original Jeff Wood story, I think it portrays Jeff more as your, like, traditional psychopath. Not in the best way possible. Going back to David Neer did a much better job at portraying a, psychopath Jeff. You know, he's a lot more of what you would think a psychopath would be, rather than how the original Go to Sleep was written. But again, I'm pretty sure Go to Sleep, I feel like the story was written by a kid around Jeff's age, so, but just by the way it's written, I'm like, I wrote stuff when I was that age too, I'm like, yeah, so no judgment, but obviously, like, the whole, he got the urge to hurt someone, he had the strong urge to hurt someone, that's not, I don't think that's actually how it goes. Again, David Neer, his, version of Jeff Mason, is a much more, I think, realistic depiction of a psychopath that, you know, a Jeff the Killer character can be. Where, in turn, my version of Jeff, he's literally, like, a normal kid who, again, trauma and this whole thing happens to him where he becomes a sociopath over time. Obviously, he doesn't just click. He's a sociopath all of a sudden. Like, it takes time because sociopaths aren't born, they're made. So in that sense, you're exposed to a certain environment, you're exposed to certain things that happen to you, and from there, you kind of just, you know, become a sociopath. And obviously, I want to just kind of segue this into this, but again, Jeff is a normal kid and he just becomes a sociopath through tragic events, where in turn Randy, drum roll please, is a psychopath. Randy is a psychopath. I've been wanting to say that. Oh my god. So Randy is a psychopath. Say it again. So obviously, I guess before starting this bit of the video or the podcast, no ill upon anyone with essentially, psychopaths or sociopaths aren't always bad people, you know? Antisocial personality disorder, it's a very real thing. It's not just something that fictional horror movie characters have. Like, no, it's a very real condition, and I don't want to paint distasteful light to it. Obviously, not everyone who has an antisocial personality disorder is a terrible, disgusting, awful, evil person, you know? But Randy is portrayed as one. And that's one thing, when I went back and I really thought about it, this was kind of my intention when I originally did it, like, the rewriting stuff. I wanted to portray Randy more as, like, instead of, like, this punk kid, like, this little, like, punk who wants to take people's money and thinks he owns the street and this and that, he's more of just, like, this really troubled kid, That was the intention in the original rewrite, but looking back now, I'm like, oh no, more in depth, like, Randy is a psychopath. You know, there's so many things sprinkled in there, I don't know how intentional they were, but there's a lot of things that sprinkled in there, it's like, oh, yeah, for sure. In the sense that, like, looking back, yeah, Randy, that's how I view him. He's very inspired off of Henry Bowers from, the 2017 movie. It was a different interpretation. Rather than the miniseries. The miniseries Henry Bowers, again, the Bowers gang in the miniseries was great, but I like, oh my god, the Henry Bowers gang in the 2017, wow, they did those actors did an amazing job. They were really, really well played. And the way that, I don't remember the actor's name. Oh my god, wait, let me Google this. I want to give the actor credit. Let me get my laptop out. But the actor who played Henry Bowers did an amazing job. I have to say, he did a very great job at portraying this character. And Henry Bowers, I'm pretty sure it was implied in that movie specifically that he is supposed to be a psychopath. Just by the way he acts, it's like, oh yeah, for sure. I'm pretty sure that's like the whole intention. Let me Google. I want to give the actor credit. Okay. Alright, so this is, let's see. Is this the actor? Yes, okay. Nicholas Hamilton. That's such an easy name. How did I forget that? That's such an easy name. Nicholas Hamilton. So Nicholas Hamilton is, all credits to him. He did an amazing job in both movies. He even showed up in it was 2019. It was fun. How am I forgetting this? I literally went to go see it Chapter 2 in theaters. But he even did like an amazing job portraying him in Chapter 2 as well. Even if he was in it for a bit, he did a great job. Did a great job at portraying this character. But his portrayal of the character, Nicholas Hamilton's portrayal is like 100% how I see Randy in that sense. And just the Bowers gang in general, the way that they are, totally 100%. That's how I see Randy, Keith, and Troy, but especially Randy in that sense. And through thinking about it, I really thought about it, but the original kind of consensus I wanted to make about Randy is that there's all this shit that's around him, is that, oh, this is a really troubled kid who tends to hurt others for intentionally no reason. Like, he's a threat to be forced with. People are scared of him. They think he's gonna hurt people in the future. Like, the school is terrified of this kid. The whole consensus I wanted to have was that he comes from a broken home. Police are always at his house. He harms animals. Like, it's sprinkled in there. It's mentioned quite a bit. But then I really thought about it, and I was like, what if none of that's true? Like, what if Randy is not from a broken home? And, like, this is my headcanon for him now. And I guess the portrayal that, looking back at the rewrite, definitely how I want, Randy to be seen is that he's lying about everything. He's lying about it. So if you actually want to go back and reread the rewrite after this, this is definitely something to keep in mind. So essentially, Randy is not abused. He doesn't come from a broken home. He comes from a normal-ass suburban home. His family is normal. It's just he has an undiagnosed underlying personality disorder, or antisocial personality disorder. He's a psychopath. That he doesn't, I guess the family doesn't know. Maybe, I don't even know if he knows. I don't even know if he knows that he has, but, there's not something right with this kid. I don't think that he's definitely not abused. I think, I imagine his parents being very normal. Just this false narrative going around that he's from a broken home, or he's going around saying that he's from a broken home. His dad's an abusive asshole. And his mom is like this. You know what I mean? Like, there's different ways that's like, oh, well, he's lying though. And there's one line in particular. Let me pull this out. I even talked about this in my original recording of the podcast. Let me pull it out. But there's one part of it that the whole thing where Randy pours bleach on Jeff, it was to quote-unquote clean up Jeff's act. Let me pull up that quote right now so I can kind of talk about this now, because this is the most prime example I can think of. Okay. He grabbed the white bottle, bringing it into Jeff's view. Bleach. One time my dad pulled a bottle of bleach on me. A well-known cleaning product. He heard about all the shit I cause, though that dick is no saint. He claimed that I needed to clean my act up, so he held me down and poured it all over me. It stung like a bitch, but meh, I got out fine. So now, it's your turn, he said, twisting the cap off. So, in that sense, want to know something? Randy was lying about that. He's never had bleach poured on him. His dad never did that to him. He lied about that. Randy was the one who came up with that. He was the one who came up with the whole idea of, oh, let me pour bleach on this kid, but he doesn't want to be, I guess, again, pouring bleach on some kid is bad enough. Like, that's bad enough. Like, you aren't okay for doing that. And it's even acknowledged that Randy and Keith and Troy, it's implied that they're terrified of him, just by how they react after. They're like, whoa, okay, someone do something, like, he's laughing. And even the fact that, like, he pours bleach on Jeff. Jeff is, like, he's stinging in pain, and he's, like, laughing at him. He's laughing, and Keith and Troy are like, what do we do? Like, what the hell? Like, they weren't expecting this, like, it to go this far. And so, yeah, the whole narrative that Randy's lying about all that he's not actually abused. His dad never poured bleach on him. He's just saying that. In that sense, you could take Randy as a very unreliable narrator. So, again, if you want to reread the story, you go back and you're like, wait, so this is all a lie in a way. The only part that I will say that's true is the fact that when there's a kid that warns Jeff, a kid in Randy's grade, because I age Aunt Randy up to be 17. So he's a senior in high school along with Keith and Troy. Which makes a little bit more sense than him being 12. I still don't fully understand the whole being 12 thing, but, you know. Anyway, so the whole thing, that there's, like, this kid in Randy's grade who comes up to Jeff to warn Jeff about him, and he goes, hey, he's from a really broken home. The police are always at his house. And Jeff dismisses it, and he goes, well, are you kidding me? That's, like, so cliche. I doubt that any of that's true. And the kid goes, I don't know. The police are always at the house. And this kid, he literally says to Jeff, he goes, there's rumors that he even harms animals. That's the one true thing. Because, like, this is not even a cliche. This is, like, true. That a lot of serial killers, like, real-life serial killers, one thing they do is that, like, a sign of it, I guess, is, like, brutally harming small animals as kids or teenagers for fun, for the hell of it, for no reason. And I feel like that's one thing that Randy is definitely doing, for sure, if we're taking into account that he is a dangerous psychopath who's not being treated. I think the no treatment, he has never been treated, never been diagnosed, is a big part of why he's, you know, so unhinged, but also his personality, the way he is. Again, not everyone who has this disorder is like this, but he is. And, I think maybe if the cops are always at the house, because even Lou mentions this. Lou goes, oh, that kid, isn't that the kid where the cops, is that kid from the house that the cops always get called? And I think at that point, it's well aware that Randy probably gets the cops called on him because he's killing the neighborhood's pets, you know? Gets cops called on him that way, and I'm sure he's been in legal trouble before. I'm sure he's even gone to juvie before. I'm sure that's why, like, I'm sure he's done a lot of stuff. But that's why the cops are called, not because of his parents. I think the only thing about his parents that would be seen as bad is that I feel like they're neglectful of him as to why he's never been diagnosed. That they're, like, neglectful of his mental health in the sense of, like, oh, my kid's fine. My kid's not like this. My kid's not like this. He's just a boy. Boys will be boys. That's just the way he is. He's just going through a rowdy, rebellious phase. When really, Randy is actually a really, really troubled kid who needs help. Who in turn is, like, it's, like, he's hurting students. He's not a good kid, people are scared to be around him. Keith and Troy, I feel like they got themselves into a bad situation where they're friends with him, and they can't not be friends with him. They're kind of forced to go along with him. They're forced to technically be sheep, because I don't want to say anything against him, because I know how dangerous Randy is. If Keith and Troy know that Randy's whole thing with his parents is lying, that's up to the viewer. I don't know if they know. It's up to the viewer. I guess it's up to whatever you think. The reader, not viewer. The reader. Whatever you think, kind of. How you want to see that. And one thing that's actually pretty ironic if you think about Randy in that way. Okay, Randy's a psychopath. And Jeff is a normal kid who becomes a psychopath. It's kind of weird in the sense that it's like a reverse role. It's like, if you look at the story, if you don't know who Jeff the Killer is, if you just read the story, you're probably going to think, oh, Randy is going to become Jeff the Killer in the end. You would probably, like, that's kind of what I want to go with, that Jeff is going to be seen more as, like, the protagonist, and Randy's a clear antagonist. That Randy, I think in an alternate universe, Randy would have killed Jeff in the fire, and Randy would have taken the ceremonial spot of Jeff the Killer. Like, he would have taken on the Jeff the Killer identity instead. because of just the way he is. But it's ironic, yeah, like a psychopath creates a sociopath through an unfortunate series of events. And even the way that, I guess another way to kind of go with Randy being a psychopath is the fact that when Jeff initially confronts him and goes, hey, you killed Ben, why the hell aren't you in JDC, what's wrong with you, that Randy dismisses it and he goes, oh, well, the courts, well, you know what, the courts didn't think it was me, so you know what, it wasn't me, it was just an accident, that's why I'm not in juvie. And that, I think Randy, he wasn't sorry for what happened, he was sorry he got caught. And that kind of goes into what happened with Ben. So I guess it's only implied what happens with Ben, but essentially what happens with him, if you're really wondering, is that when Jeff was running back to the cabin to go grab sunscreen, there was a commotion at the docks, and they were sitting right there near the docks. There was a commotion going on. Ben went to go check on it. Maybe Randy was picking on this one kid, so Ben wanted to stand up against him, and he got pushed in the water, and everyone thought that Ben was faking the drowning part. Like, Randy thought he was faking it, or just didn't care enough to go save this kid, and this kid who can't swim drowns, and once a counselor is able to actually save him and get him out of the water, like, the damage is already done, kind of thing. That's kind of where the whole thing comes from, and, yeah, it's ironic if you think about it, like, in that sense, Randy's actions, in a way, like, they come back to him in the form of Jeff the Killer, in that sense. So I think that's a pretty interesting look at the character. Again, if you want to reread, I think it's, when I reread the story, actually, I had that in mind of, oh, Randy's lying, he's a manipulative psychopath. That's kind of, it's an interesting way to read back the story. So if you want to do that, read that back with that in your mind. It's interesting. So, yeah, so going off, so that is a characterization of Jeff and Randy. So that's kind of my whole thing with them. So what should I talk about next? I guess maybe the world around Jeff the Killer. So the world surrounding this, because you think, what happens to this? Oh, okay. I'll probably talk about this anyway. Okay, so the world. Okay, so in this rewrite, it takes place in 2010. It's not explicitly mentioned in the rewrite because I didn't have a time frame in mind. I didn't have like an explicit time frame in mind. I also didn't want to date it in any way. I didn't want it to be dated or anything like that. But this story, looking back, I had canon. It took place in 2010 in New Jersey, in a suburb of New Jersey. So Jeff, he's from Jersey. And I always had him in mind, like, in this story, I always had in mind when I wanted to, like, write a story for Jeff, I was, like, figuring out what state he's from, and I always imagined that he's from the northern state of the state, yeah. And either New York State, Pennsylvania, or New Jersey. Those were, like, the three places that I really had in mind. And I haven't been to Jersey or New York State or New York or anything like that, but I have been to Pennsylvania a few years ago. Oh, it's beautiful down there, but yeah, that's one thing that I, imagine that he's from one of those three, like the suburbs of one of those three, and just Jeff being from New Jersey, it just rolls off the tongue the best. I feel like it fits the best, and I'm like, yeah, I can imagine that Jeff the Killer from New Jersey. So that happens in 2010 in this universe, in Jersey. I feel like Jeff, kind of the aftermath of what happened, I think that the fire itself, like the accident, probably hit the town very hard. Like, I mean, this kid is literally set on fire in the woods and disfigured greatly. It's like, that's pretty traumatic. I'm sure, obviously, that spread through, everyone heard about it. I'm sure it was on the news. Like, that was already bad enough. And then the murder of the Woods family, even more so. If I actually would have written this story now, one thing I would have done was, I would have named it The Woods Family Massacre, Jeff the Killer Rewritten, rather than Go to Sleep, a Jeff the Killer Rewrite. It would have been The Woods Family Massacre, because I'm sure that that's what it's actually called. Like, in the universe, I'm sure that that's what it was called, because essentially that's what it is. That, the cops are called, they find this house, with blood everywhere, this 13-year-old kid is stabbed to death on the floor, and, obviously Lou does not survive. I want to put that out there. Lou doesn't survive in this story. The parents, too. And it's, like, with no killer in sight, Jeff is gone. They don't know what happened. So it's, like, pretty jarring, and obviously that'd be terrible for this town. It's a pretty violent murder, you know what I mean? And, one thing that I, like, for sure think that, it would have spread around as, like, an urban legend. Like, the legend of Jeff, the killer, it's an urban legend in and of itself in this universe. Which, I mean, Jeff the Killer was once an urban legend. I'm sure he still is an urban legend. even though we know he's fake, we know he's a fictional character, to some, Jeff the Killer is more of an urban legend in our world, you know what I mean? But in this world, I feel like that Jeff is an urban legend in and of himself, which is actually nice. It's a little homage to the whole creepypasta thing, right? That, I think that the whole thing of what happened with Jeff's family, I'm sure word got out about Lou having a smile carved into his face. I'm sure word got out about that. Like, that's pretty jarring. And, then these murders in New Jersey start popping up a while after about people being murdered with smiles cut into their faces. It's, like, very similar. And then you go, wait a second. And I'm sure, like, the kids started forming, like, urban legends of what if it was Jeff this whole time. And I'm sure even just to begin with that, like, okay, you have this, like, literally this murder, this family murder, and the oldest son is gone. The oldest son is missing. What are kids going to do in that universe? They're going to spread rumors and say it was Jeff. After he was burnt, he became a murderer, he killed his family, and he's still out there. And I feel like Jeff became a local urban legend. I feel like the police department themselves, obviously the case is put on hold because they couldn't figure out, like, who did it. But I'm pretty sure, like, they would feel like in this universe, they would have felt that maybe it was a break-in. Like, someone ransacked the house, they broke in, they murdered the family, and either took Jeff, or he's hidden somewhere, but they couldn't find him, like, he's buried somewhere, you know what I mean? And Jeff went missing. But, like, that's, like, the official cold case of it, but, I guess to have a little bit more closure for the actual, like, family and stuff, like, the extended relatives of the Woods family, but it's, like, yeah, like, that's an urban legend around, like, the neighborhood throughout the kids and stuff, and I feel like, even Jeff, because he was in high school in the story, right? Like, that Jeff's school, maybe every October, they have, like, a ceremony, or, like, a thing dedicated to Jeff, kind of a memorial dedicated to Jeff about what happened, about what terrible thing happened to him, and just, like, as a cautionary tale, and I'm sure, like, kids would pull pranks when they dress up as Jeff the Killer, quote-unquote, and stuff like that, and people obviously dismiss it, like, oh, no, he didn't actually kill his family, when in reality, it's, like, you know what I mean? It's, like, the urban legend, which I think makes it creepy, which obviously that wouldn't actually happen in real life, but it's like, yeah, like, it's just cool to think of Jeff as an urban legend in and of himself. One other thing that I think is interesting is the fact that what if Jeff's house, the Woods family house, is considered more of like a Myers house later on, in the sense that it's like just this abandoned house. It's a very nice house on the street, but no one wants to buy it considering what happened in there. So it's like a Myers house, like, the whole urban legend with Jeff, oh, he lives in there, he comes back every time, you know what I mean? Like, that whole thing, like, with the whole Michael Myers Halloween thing, in that sense, and I feel like people that go, they pay their respects, they put, like, maybe flowers or pictures of the family to pay respects outside the house and that kind of stuff. But, yeah, it's like, so I feel like it was a local urban legend about Jeff the Killer, rummages around. I'm sure even there were sightings of Jeff in this very universe, in the universe this story takes place in, that people kind of connect, you know what I mean? So, yeah, and I guess this leads into, where would this lead into now? So before I talk about, because I did on Instagram, I did ask if anyone wanted to, if anyone had any specific topics I'd like to talk about, so I'm going to go over those specific topics soon, but one thing I do want to talk about is face claims. That's a little fun little thing, for the characters, so I'll put them on screen in editing, but, so, I got a burp. Excuse me. Okay. So my face claims for the characters, thought that would be fun. So my face claim, even though Jeff the Killer, he only shows up for one story? He only shows up for, one chapter. He only shows up for one chapter at the moment. My face claim for Jeff the Killer is Chris Motionless from the band Motionless in White. Nothing against Chris. He's beautiful. But here's the thing. Chris fits a lot of the facial descriptions that I would think for Jeff the Killer, in the sense that I described. I imagine Jeff having a longer face, more prominent, more pronounced nose, and just the fact that Chris Motionless, he has the eyeliner, he has the whole look going for him. At some pictures, he has long hair. Like, he has a whole look going for him. He's alternative. It's easier to imagine him as Jeff the Killer in my eyes. And that's kind of interesting. And I was like, wow, he fits the descriptions of how I imagine Jeff. So when I draw Jeff now, I do try to kind of keep a little picture of Chris Motionless with me, kind of for reference. But yeah, so that's my headcanon for Jeff. Young Jeff, I don't know who this kid is, but there was this one edit that this is that someone took this picture of this kid and they edited to look more like Jeff the Killer, like young Jeff. Remember, I saw this and I was like staring. I was like, whoa, oh my god, this is literally what I imagine young Jeff looking like. Obviously, I imagine Jeff with a little bit longer hair, maybe a little more emo styled than this kid. But it's like, yeah, wow. And if you actually reverse Google image the search, if you do a reverse search of this picture, it's actually a picture of a kid on a hairstyling website for hair ideas for young boys, like hairstyle ideas. And this is one of the pictures. So someone edited this kid to look more like Jeff, put it in black and white, edited the eyes to be lighter, edited his skin to be more like, I guess, more smooth and stuff. But yeah, I'm like, wow, okay, so yes, yeah, again, if his hair was longer, in like a little bit more of an emo style, definitely what I imagine young Jeff looking like. For Homicidal Lou, even though Homicidal Lou never shows up in the story, my face claim for him, this is more recent, but I was like, wow, how did I not think of this earlier, is Johnny Gilbert. And because I follow Johnny Gilbert on TikTok, so I was like, cause I really admire his style. If you can't tell, I really enjoy the emo style and stuff. And one thing for sure is that, like, I was like watching his TikToks, and I'm like, wow, okay, he reminds me of Homicidal Lou a little bit. He reminds me of Lou in that sense. And I was like, okay, yeah, he's definitely my face claim for Lou when he's older, as Homicidal Lou, when he gets brought back and stuff like that. And I'm like, it's easier to imagine him as Lou because, you know, like I said, like same thing with Chris Motionless, is that, you know, Johnny Gilbert, he has the hair, he has the eyeliner, he's already alternative. It's easier to imagine him as Homicidal Lou, but even just like, he seems like he's tired in all his videos too, and I'm like, that seems like Lou, like how I imagine Lou. So yeah, and so now, for my face claims for the Bowers gang, Bowers gang, no, no, my god, not Henry Bowers, I'm getting ahead of myself, no. For Randy's gang is for sure the Bowers, I'm dumb, the whole Bowers gang from It Chapter 1. Let me Google, you know what, let me Google the names of the cast. I don't wanna. 17, Bowers gang. I don't remember the actor's name. Well, I know that, okay, Nicholas Hamilton, he plays, obviously we know that he plays Thing. Okay. Yeah, I have a picture. Let me just get a picture of them right now. Yeah, 100% what I imagine them looking like. So essentially, there's 4 in the Bowers gang. But if we take out Vic, who looks like, some people described him as like as a punk Tom Felton or Draco Malfoy. If you take him out of the equation, because only the 3, it's like, oh yeah, they're totally my face claims for Randy, Keith, and Troy. I want to get their names, oh my god, because I want to actually, actors, I want to get their names, I want to actually credit them. Because I didn't do that in my original podcast, but I'm going to do it. No, it doesn't give their names, damn. Whoa, there's more people than I thought. Okay, so if we're going off of, there's more members of the Bowers gang. I'm stupid. How did I forget this? I haven't watched the movie in a little while, so if we're going off of, I cannot get their names. I'm too lazy to go, you know what? Okay, so in this sense, so, let's see. So, Henry, it's kind of what I imagine Randy looking like. The only thing is that Henry Bowers, for face claim, he's a little bit short. That's the only problem. He's a little bit shorter than how I imagine Randy. I imagine Randy being, like, taller, with, like, obviously the dyed red hair. He's, like, naturally a ginger, so he has a bit of facial hair and stuff, and it's, like, ginger facial hair, even though, like, you know, he dyes his hair bright red, but, you know. And, but, yeah, the way he looks, I'm like, yeah, totally. If not, Nicholas Hamilton's portrayal of Henry Bowers is totally how I see Randy. And then Belge, for Troy, 100% how I see him how I imagine him looking. Which, I mean, the way Troy is described in the original story is kind of crude and kind of mean. No, not kind of mean. Very mean. He's, like, described as this tub of lard, and I'm like, give the kid a break. So I just described him as a little bit of a bigger kid. The actor who plays Belge, he's definitely a little more stocky. He's, like, more of a stocky guy, which is a little bit more how I imagine Troy. Just more stocky. And he's 100% how I imagine him. And then, oh my god, Patrick Hockstetter, the actor who played him, is, like, 100% how I see Keith. And he's a perfect description of him. He's tall, he's lengthy, and he's got, like, even the part where he's, like, in the sewers, and he has, like, the spray bottle with the, he makes, like, the, what is it? Like, the blowtorch? He has, like, the makeshift blowtorch. that one part, I'm like, that in and of itself, it feels like a reference to Keith, because Keith is the one who lights Jeff on fire in the original story. But just the way that he looks, his portrayal of Patrick Hockstetter feels totally like how I imagined Keith. Even though I think Patrick's a little bit more unhinged than Keith, but you know what I mean? So those are my head face claims for the characters. Funny enough, actually, I guess before I go into your questions and your topics that you wanted me to talk about, I actually have done a few cosplays from 2018 as of now. So I did so I guess I'll go through that quickly if you want to look at the screen. So I did a full-on cosplay for Jeff Woods as of after 2018, after my rewrite. So I did a full-on cosplay of young Jeff Woods and my portrayal of the character in my story. So yeah, I'll show pictures of that on screen. And then I even did young Jeff the Killer, so the night where, he slits his face in. I did a cosplay of that. I did a cosplay of even Randy this summer, which, oh my god, I had so much fun cosplaying him. And yeah, I guess from there, I'm trying to think. Yeah, those are really the only cosplays that I've done from then. Obviously, I cosplayed Jeff and Lou already, you know what I mean? But yeah, so I guess now it is time that I go in and I talk about some of your questions, or kind of just topics, talk about in the actual thing. I'll kind of briefly touch upon this because I think this has already been over an hour, I'm pretty sure. Well, I mean, right now my recording is at 37 minutes as of now, but there's other recordings before this, so let's see. Okay. Okay, so first question by Nightmare_Rose, 2756. They ask, does Lou die and come back or survive? Some stories say he died and some say he lived. So in the original Homicidal Lou spin-off story, Lou survives, and from there he's traumatized and becomes Homicidal Lou. In my story, Lou dies. The way I describe it is that his eyes close, kind of thing. Like, the way I describe it is eyes close forever, and he doesn't wake up, so he's, like, dead. And I want to make that clear because I know that, yeah, there are a lot of stories, like you've said, where Lou survives. So Lou, I can only really describe this quickly. So Lou, he doesn't survive. He dies, and he's brought back later, and his corpse is modified to be an adult version of himself. Like I said, as in with Johnny Gilbert being my face claim for Homicidal Lou, he's rebuilt to look more like an adult, and essentially, a demon named Sully is possessing his body to be used as a weapon against Jeff, but then Lou kind of comes through, and Sully is under control. So Sully is more of a demon than an actual, like, personality. And, yeah, so, yeah, he lives. Okay, so, hey, _, it's _ just _ me, _ asks, did he have any crushes while he was in school, and then lose the feeling of love after? So, for me, personally, this is a little headcanon that I have. It's not fully developed or anything, but it's just an idea of, like, what if Jeff, he had, like, a little middle school crush, like, in grade 8, he had a crush on this girl, told her and stuff, and who knows, maybe they, like, hang out, maybe they went on a little date, they had, like, fun little middle school crush fun stuff, you know what I mean? Like, just, like, wholesome, and, they moved to different high schools, so nothing comes out from then, and then this girl finds out about what happened with Jeff, the whole burning thing, and then she finds out that Jeff's gone missing, and then all these years later, when Jeff is finally caught and detained by the police, she learns that, yeah, Jeff becomes a murderer, and I just thought about that. It's just, like, so weird to think, like, yeah, you had a crush on this kid, you had, like, a little wholesome, middle school thing going, and then you find out that he became a serial killer after, so yeah. And yeah, so I'm only answering a few of these. I want to make that clear. I'm only answering a few of these, though I appreciate everyone who left kind of topics. Okay, so let's see. So, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm going to butcher your name, so I apologize. So, Cleo Annie Rose asks, Randy, Keith, and Troy's story on how they met, relationship with each other, if they have any siblings, etc. So, I haven't really gone further enough to characterize them to the point where they have, like, siblings and stuff, but I feel like, how they met, I don't even know, but I feel like their dynamic, I've gone over this, their dynamic is more, I'm trying to think, their dynamic is more, like, Randy, is the leader, obviously, he's not normal in the head, he's not right in the head, and Keith and Troy they're normal kids, I think they're troublemakers, they're looking for trouble. They want to have fun with the trouble. You know, they kind of want to try that this lifestyle, but it's came to a point where they can't get out of it, and they're really scared to kind of ditch the gang, ditch their little friend group. And I feel like Troy and Keith kind of have, like, their own little, like, buddy system in the sense that Randy is insane. Again, not trying to talk ill of anyone who is a psychopath, but Randy is actually, like, a dangerous person. Like, Randy's a very, very dangerous person, and they kind of create their own buddy system in the sense that, like, they're both scared of him, and that's implied by the fact that when Randy is laughing after he puts bleach on Jeff, they're like, you tell something. So they have their own little buddy system going on. And I feel like they've, like, bonded over the fact that they both are kind of stuck in this really bad situation. So xhorrorcat_cosplays X asks, do you think his scars will ever heal, or does he renew them? So Jeff, I feel, personally, he recuts his smile every now and then. I mean, the way I cosplay him, he has, like, a already not fresh cut wound, but, like, a wound, you know. But I do feel like Jeff, he has to let his face scar over. And I feel like that'd take a while. If you consider the fact that, like, you know, your face moves a lot, like, especially where it is, that'd be a very hard place for it to heal. So I do feel like he does wait for his cuts to heal over time, and then he'll renew them maybe, like, once every year, you know what I mean? But he does, I do think, to keep the look going. Maybe he throws a little bit of Heath Ledger Joker in there. He paints the scars in red before actually recutting it. Funny thing, my background is Heath Ledger. It's Joker. That's what I'm looking at right now. Okay. Okay. So, So Toby.cosplayer_fan asks, could you tell more about Lou as a character? So I wish I characterized Lou a little bit more. That's one thing I definitely regret, is not characterizing Lou a little bit more. But one thing I will say is that Lou, is definitely, I do think this is implied, you know, well enough, that Lou is just, a normal kid. He's very, like, quiet, in the sense he's calm, he's very collected, he's quite mature for his age, I'd find. Like, he's pretty mature. Where Jeff is more, I guess you would say, impulsive. Lou sometimes has to be the voice of reason and go, yeah, no, don't do that. He's a smart kid. He tries really hard in school, probably. And, you know, yeah, he's just some normal kid, which is really sad considering what happens to him after, which is just terrible. And, yeah. Poor kid. I feel awful. Same person asks again, was Jeff a narcissist before he snapped? Definitely not. He was, again, like I said, a normal kid. The narcissistic sociopath came through after, where he became, you know, Jeff the Killer. That's the whole thing, that Jeff the Killer was, like, full of himself and a narcissistic sociopath. But no, Jeff Woods before was definitely not. Okay, more questions? Let's see. No, I already went through those ones. Okay, here's the last one. Okay. So, Thomas Schenkel.jpg asks, was Slenderman ever meant to interact in the story? Yes. Before I ever started writing, the whole idea I wanted, which, I mean, this headcanon has changed, was that, Jeff pretty much runs into the woods after he commits the murder of his family, and essentially Slenderman takes him in, and kind of forms an alliance there. But the problem is that seems too proxy-esque. Like, Jeff is not a proxy. So it's like, I kind of scrapped that idea, and I was like, I'll keep it more implied. And essentially, I was talking with a friend about this recently, but I feel that EJ was the one who found him, which, I mean, talking about EJ is a whole other thing, but I do feel that EJ was the one who found Jeff. Maybe he found Jeff more for food. He, like, found this random kid, was like, oh, okay, food, and then he takes Jeff in, realizes that he's, like, you know, not a normal kid, and then in time, he treats him as an apprentice, and then, you know, grows more attached to him. But yes, Slenderman was supposed to interact in the story. His relationship, okay, so Marky_10 asks his relationship with Lou. Like I said, they have, like, more dynamic, like, Lou is sometimes more the voice of reason. Obviously, they got along really well. They were, very close brotherly, relationship. They're only a year apart. They've always been close, probably consider each other best friends in that sense, which makes, Lou's death even more tragic, right? Okay, so last one I'll answer. Princess_Starlight17 asks his life in school. So I feel that Jeff, he was a good student. Maybe didn't always fully pay attention in class. Maybe sometimes slacked off a little bit. If, like, things didn't interest him, he wouldn't care as much. But I do feel like that he, was still a very good student. studious to the most he could, and was definitely, like, not a rambunctious kid in school or anything like that. Like, he actually tried. And yeah. And alright, I think that's all I really have to talk about. I had a lot of fun doing this little revisitation podcast. I had a lot of fun talking about it. It's very interesting to go back and talk about it. One thing, and like, I know I was worried again. I was worried this story was not going to be good when I went back and read it. Obviously, there's things I would have done way differently, if I were to actually, go back and read it. You know, go back and read it now, it would have been different. But I'm still happy with how it turned out. I'm still, really happy that I was able to write it. I'm happy I was able to do it at the time. So I really hope you guys enjoyed this little podcast if you're still here. I had a lot of fun doing this. It was very interesting. Again, just to read everything. Thank you for everyone who submitted little topic ideas. Sorry if I didn't touch upon yours, but there were, I will try to go over a few because it's already been pretty long, this podcast. But yeah, I really hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope I talked about everything that kind of need to be talked about. So yeah, thank you for coming to this little podcast thing. I had a lot of fun. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. Bye.